Glenn Beck asked some interesting questions recently that many of us have. What are we paying for in terms of intelligence? What is the NSA doing? Right? He points out that the Patriot Act opened the door to our intelligence agencies basically being able to track every keynote, every keystroke that we make. So why does it take the Ryan Mauros, and I would add the Nick Shirleys of the world, to reveal corruption, fraud, and the funding of those creating chaos and sowing the seeds of hate across our nation? Perhaps like me, you've wondered why we see hundreds of professionally made signs for overlapping grievances pop up just hours at the drop of a hat after an incident. Yeah, what is that, right? And we wonder, what is the relationship between the foreign enemies of the United States and the riots, violence, and unrest unfolding across our country? The curtain is being pulled back. And tonight, I'm delighted to welcome a man whose career has been defined by an absolutely relentless pursuit of such clarity in an increasingly complex global security landscape. Ryan Mauro has established himself as one of the foremost experts on national security, counterterrorism, and the shifting dynamics of global, geopolitical conflict. Starting his work in intelligence as a teenager, and I heard the backstory of that tonight, I mean teenager, he has spent more than 2 decades working with law enforcement, briefing intelligence agencies, and providing on-the-ground data that policymakers often miss. Ryan Mauro doesn't just bring us the what, he brings us the who and the how. So we've all seen the headlines. We all saw the riots that paralyzed Minneapolis and Los Angeles. Ryan has documented how these events were not isolated incidents, but part of a sophisticated campaign involving over 150 pro-terrorism groups operating right here on U.S. soil. His initiatives include analyzing how decentralized groups use emerging technologies to influence Western policy, ideological mapping, which is a massive undertaking to track and understand the recruitment pipelines of extremist organizations, and he also works on counter-subversion, developing strategies to protect democratic institutions from internal and external interference. You've probably seen Ryan on major news networks like Fox and CNN, and he is regularly breaking news on The Glenn Beck Show. Here tonight to share what his latest research reveals about the challenges ahead, the director of the Mauro Institute, Ryan Mauro.
Okay, thanks everyone for having me, and thanks for coming out. I'm really excited to talk to you today because this is basically a presentation I had to write from scratch because things have changed so much. I've been involved in a lot of different things besides what I do in the public eye, and so things have changed so much over the past 2 years that I have whole new points I have to make and forecasting of what the future looks like and how we have to handle it. And so I really enjoy being able to use you guys as a test dummy to see what resonates, and hopefully there's nothing that doesn't resonate and then I have to pay the consequences, but we'll see. My goal is for you to look at the situation here in the United States very differently when you leave, and globally, but also to feel empowered and understand exactly what you can do to fight it and how big of an impact you can have, that you don't need a fancy title or an elected position. And I'm not talking about doing something like write a letter to your congressman or something lame. You can do things that actually save lives. It's just there aren't people out there showing people how to do it rather easily. And so I hope to inspire some activism on the part of everyone here and for you to not just be fearful of what's happening, but also be hopeful. Be excited about the future and excited about how much better things are going to become once we get past some of these emerging threats. I also saw the quality of the chairs that you guys are sitting in. So I want you to know I'm not offended if you stand up and you start walking around. I'm not going to interpret that as me failing. If you want to take notes on your phone, I'm also not going to be offended because I know I've been in that seat as well where I want to take notes. I'm like, oh, the speaker's going to think I'm like texting my girlfriend or something like that. But if you're taking notes, it's all good. And if you're feeling uncomfortable and I see you standing and moving around, I'm not going to be offended. But to kind of describe the new era that we're in, I would say you have to understand the genesis of how we got here and how the benchmarks kind of coincide. And there's not so much distance between some of the atrocities that we have faced as a country. On September 11th, what we learned was that the enemies that we face could reach our shores. Even a terrorist organization in Afghanistan that's not terribly sophisticated, not terribly powerful, it wasn't that hard to come and attack and kill a lot of us. And you could also breed among us. You could actually come here, not be a citizen or get citizenship, and build a network right on our own soil. And so we had to grapple with that fear and that understanding for a very long time, and we still are. But then on September 10th, when what happened to Charlie Kirk happened, we learned something more dangerous, that the forces of extremism and anti-Americanism realized that most of us didn't fully understand. Was that they no longer have to strategize about how to breach the walls of our shining city on the hill. They don't have to talk about how to defeat the watchmen on the wall, how to kill them, how to defeat them, how to get past them. All they have to do is convince those watchmen on the wall to become demolition men who feel the need to dismantle that shining city themselves and use the smoldering rubble to rebuild it in their images, to infect their minds, to say, maybe America wasn't so great ever, or maybe it isn't anymore, and I've got a better idea. I can make it better, more like what I think, and it's my duty to destroy it and rebuild it. And that's the mindset that you see as a commonality between all the adversaries that we face, because there are many different flavors of them, different ideologies, and within the ideologies there are subcompartments. But what unifies them all is not a lust just for revenge, that they were so offended at American foreign policy that they had to retaliate, or that Charlie Kirk was so offensive by going to college campuses and most of the time listening for way too long to college students talk like they're professors when they're not. And then therefore he had to die. Because that's the narrative. You offended people. It's retribution, revenge. Whether you agree with it or not, it's revenge. No, it's an attack on civil society. It's about destroying the shining city on the hill because you feel that you are entitled to help reconstruct it. You have a better idea. And so it is moral for you to try to destroy it because you know so well. And so I would say that today you cannot understand accurately the new era that we're in, particularly since Charlie was assassinated on September 10th, without understanding September 11th. And you cannot understand why 9/11 still matters without understanding 9/10. You need one to understand one in order to understand the other. And you can't fully understand either of them unless you understand October 7th, 2023. And this is what I feel is being lost on the vast majority of the American people. They got little tidbits of it. May not have incorrect ideas, but it's not being all put together. They're not seeing the system that we're against, the ecosystem. So let's put it this way. I'll start with 1 week, exactly 1 week, after Charlie was assassinated. I appeared on Charlie's show because Glenn Beck was the guest host. And there were two things Glenn chose to do. The first was to place Rush Limbaugh's golden microphone on Charlie's desk. Honor him because he said, Charlie said he wanted to be like me, Glenn Beck. He really wanted to be Rush Limbaugh. And I said, he deserves this more than I do. And Glenn Beck, unsurprisingly, with tears again, placed that golden microphone on Charlie's desk where it still is. But then he also did something else right before he did that. And he had me on to release an investigation that I had just completed and hadn't released yet, because I had been studying these extremist groups in the United States, particularly with intense focus since October 7th, where I really wanted to lay out the networks in detail. And so the question of funding came up, and everyone said, well, George Soros, George Soros, George Soros. And to be honest with you, I stayed away from the topic because everybody obsesses over him so much. I figured, what could I possibly find that someone else hasn't? And there's honestly a lot of exaggeration about him. I've seen it constantly. And he is used in a lot of anti-Semitic propaganda. So for me, if I have a limited time, I chose to go somewhere else. But then what I realized was, when I was looking at the research that was done about George Soros, no one had actually gone through all of his grants. All this time. As far back as I can remember when everyone was saying that, like, he's the Antichrist that we all need to go after. He was the top dog. Nobody went through all the grants. They found some here and there. They found some transactions. Nobody went through all of them. And I said, well, that's kind of a gap. That's a gap I can fill. And so I traced it, and what I found was since 2016, up to that point, up to, I guess, 2023, was over $80 million that we know about from his own declared records went to domestic terrorist organizations in the US and pro-terrorism organizations in the US and around the world. Groups that may not be carrying out terrorist attacks, but are openly in support and celebrating things like the October 7th terrorist attacks. And I didn't even include all the ones that think the US should be destroyed, or that Jews are horrible, that Israel should be destroyed and have a genocide against it. I used the highest threshold. Are they involved in terrorism or actively celebrating it and rooting it on? And by that highest metric, I found over $80 million going from the Open Society Foundations that he runs to these different groups. And he also funds some good groups, so I was having trouble reconciling it. And so when people say, well, is he a communist? No, he funds anti-communist groups. What's his motivation? And I talked to the Media Research Center because I couldn't reconcile it, because he would fund groups that love Hamas and the Iranian regime and then groups that help the protesters. I couldn't figure it out. And they gave me an answer that was so simplistic, it was almost hard for me to believe until they gave me the series of quotes. He says over and over again that he basically wants to be the master of the world. He says, I have a God complex. That's the kind of horrible thing that most people won't say even once. He said it repeatedly. So he probably believes it. His ideology was himself. Not even far left, I would say. Not far right, I mean, certainly not far right, but not far left, not even necessarily pro-Hamas. It was just every government in his own ego's mind is a competitor and deserves to be overthrown and undermined because he knows better. That's the Soros ideology. Very different than what I expected. And then, of course, there are groups that have different ideologies, and that's clear. But his was the most confusing one. And so I came onto Charlie's show, and I released this information with Glenn Beck. And Glenn was taken aback by it. He knew about some of it beforehand, but I don't think he understood the full breadth of it. And he told the story about how when he had a show at Fox News, he was talking about Soros' connections and who he was funding, and Soros got mad at him. And Glenn is the type of guy where if someone's mad, he actually will listen and say, well, if I'm wrong, I want to know. And actually had his number two guy meet with Soros' number two guy. And Soros' number two guy says to him, you know, you're causing a lot of trouble for us. Glenn says, yeah, I know, but if we're wrong, like, you know, let us know, try to be friendly. And the message that the guy delivered to Glenn Beck's number two person was, we're on a ship. You want to be on the ship because it's going to leave the port. You don't want to be left behind, you want to be on the ship. And Glenn's number two person said, I know my boss. I don't think he's getting on your ship. And the Soros number two guy said, listen, it's about to leave. You don't want to be left behind on that port. And Glenn says, he took that as a threat, rightfully. And then he said to me, he goes, Ryan, you know who you're declaring war on, right? You know what you're going to war against with this? I said, I know. I don't care, because I know that I'm meant to do this. I'm going to sink the ship. Amen. And so we released it. 3 business days later, it was reported in the New York Times that, because we had given it to President Trump, more so Glenn than myself, that President Trump had met with Pam Bondi and the others and had authorized the Justice Department to begin preparing the ground to formally launch investigations into Soros, specifically crediting the report that I wrote. Thank you. And what was funny was, after that show was over, I go up to my kitchen, and there was a bag with old French fries from Five Guys on there. And I was doing the anxious thing I do after something like that, where I'm pacing around, and I'm like, French fries, awesome. And I grab them, and I eat them. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't get air. And the windows started closing on my vision. It was probably the closest I've come to dying. And the last thought that I had right before my lights went out, luckily my mother came in and rescued me, was, if I die like this, nobody's going to believe I was murdered by a French fry. Not after Glenn Beck says that. I'm like, this is going to be a full-blown Soros conspiracy. Somehow Soros got that French fry into Ryan Mauro's throat, and we're going to find the truth. But how I came up with the Soros Project was that after October 7th, this is Mark Forte, I knew about these groups, but I really wanted to go into the networks, partially because a question was often asked, well, how many of the student protesters are radical? The groups that are involved, because there are people that just disagree with you. There's some people that may have some wrong ideas you disagree with that are just pro-Palestinian and feel protesting Israel is the right thing to do, especially college students still developing their ideas. You've got to have compassion and grace. I said, okay, fair. I want to figure out the proportion, because I figured that there would be a few central nodes of bad guys manipulating everybody else, but most of the groups involved just didn't realize what they gotten themselves into. Had some slogans that made them feel good. Unfortunately, what I found was different. I found almost none that accepted Israel's right to exist. I can't even remember their names, the ones that do. Almost all of them supported Hamas openly on their social media page. Newspapers, interestingly, never mentioned that. They heard about the protests by following their social media pages and their newsletters. That's how they get their report. But they glossed over or missed the fact that they were celebrating October 7th. Nobody knew about it. And I identified over 150 pro-terror groups on U.S. soil that were orchestrating the protests. And I was looking at their communications, and I came out with a report that you can look up. It's very good to give to someone who may not be fully on your side with this issue, because they can't argue with the numbers on it. It's just so solid. And so it's over 150 groups behind them. Vast majority of them are at least in allegiance to foreign powers. And so it is a wing of a foreign threat. These are not two separate things. And that's why I say 9/11 and 9/10 are two sides of the same coin. We just haven't recognized it yet. But in looking at their communications, I also saw something that enabled me to make a very accurate prediction. I said, they're already talking about this issue going away, and that their problem, they said this in their own documents and communications, I was watching them. The problem is that they have to rebuild this coalition. Fundraise, do everything from scratch, because the Middle East will pop up, go away for a little while, and then come back, and then you have to start from scratch, and you have to recruit new people. That's not how you wage an insurgency. Their words. You have to keep that network. So what do? Bash the cops. That's a 24/7 thing that you can do. It always works. That's what they're all saying. I have the documents. And so they made it very clear. They said, this issue is going to go away, and when it goes away and it stops working, how do we continue the war? We start bashing cops, and also people are going to be more likely to believe violence is legitimate against them. They need to enter a new violent phase. They got some violence off of the anti-Israel issue. Nothing like going after cops. And so that was very clearly their next phase, and I said that, and I wrote it, and then look at what happened. ICE is the #1 target. That started very quickly, and it coincides exactly with when Israel was kicking the crap out of its enemies so much that when you looked at the extremist chats, a lot of them kind of went silent because it wasn't fun anymore. Because these movements need success to fuel themselves. That's what people are attracted to. They don't have the success, they move on to other things. People start moving on to other things, and they need to pick a fight with law enforcement. So regardless of whether ICE and deportations was happening, it would have been another element of law enforcement. This was a plan that I reported on. The second study I did, leading up to the Soros report, was called When Charities Betray America. And we looked at about 500 so-called pro-Palestinian groups and activists. They're not actually pro-Palestinian, in my opinion. I'm the pro-Palestinian one. The solutions I advocate are better for the Palestinians than the ones that they advocate for. And what we found was a 3,000% increase in their violent rhetoric since October 7th, particularly towards carrying out violence on American soil. And again, the police were the top target. And that wasn't the top issue then. That was just data analysis. And so of that second group, the first, remember I said 150 groups, many of which were nonprofits. The others, the real central core was 78 groups and 30 activists who really stood out. That included 26 registered 501c3 charities, 2 501c4s, or fiscally sponsored projects, which is where you appear independent, but you're actually working through a larger nonprofit. And that's what my nonprofit does, so there's nothing wrong with that, but they use it for nefarious ends. 19 of the activists at that core are employees of public or private colleges or leaders in charities. Nearly half of them were college campus groups. And the other point that I like to make, and occasionally when there's drama in these networks, because unsurprisingly they fight a lot, Because think about it, everything about them is an obsession and overdramatic. So of course that's going to spill over into their annoying personal lives where like they get along for a minute and then they find something stupid to fight about. And the point that often they'll make is say, oh, you're just doing it for the money. You're just doing it for the money. I thought you were a communist. I thought you were an anarchist. When you look at the tax forms like I have, and what you can see is clear, this whole thing, anti-Semitism, hating America, supporting Hamas, it's a business model that works. I mean, you may not be making millions and millions of dollars, but most people don't feel like they need that. Especially if it's a cause that you believe in, so you can, even if it's a horrible one, feel good doing it. The revenue skyrocketed to all these nonprofits. And that's why you saw, when people say, how come all of these groups that may have been, I guess what you consider liberal, I wouldn't consider them that, but the ones that identify as liberal or Democratic leaning, got involved in this pro-Hamas, anti-Israel issue. Why? They're supposed to care about like saving rhinos in Africa. What's going on? It's a fundraising thing. They saw how much money everyone else was making. They said, oh, all we have to do is put out a newsletter on MailChimp or on Substack and make a lot of money. Okay. And then everyone jumped in. And the revenue increased each year. Might have decreased this year, but up until now, it's been increasing. And I'll tell you what, I look at the forms. Yeah, sometimes they expand to get new employees, but not always. Salaries increases. Things that they spend, on programs, which is another way of getting money to their own people. It's a capitalist enterprise. You can make a lot of money dismantling capitalism. But the point that I made to Glenn about this, when I was saying, if you're looking for the battlefield, there's a digital battlefield, and then there's also the nonprofit sector battlefields. Like, there are the overseas battlefields that are very, very important, but actually, the biggest battles are in our minds and hearts, but that's largely an effect of these digital battlefields that I'm watching, that are real ecosystems. One group sharing another group's activity. You can draw it out. It's not just random tweets all happening. And then also the nonprofit sector and how that all interconnects. Because you'll see the same guy running 3 groups. Or one guy's a board on one, and you just draw it all out and you realize what you thought was a coalition of 30 groups is like 5 people with 5 groups. And then they all have different titles that you can say, look, all the good people in society, that guy cares about gay people, that guy cares about black people, that guy cares about Mexican people, that guy cares about white people, that guy cares about... Every issue, we're all saying the same thing. Therefore, if you disagree with us, you're a bad person. It's in reality the same people with the same donors. And they just know how to have that self-righteous act so that you have no ability to fight back because they are instantaneously the righteous ones just by that presentation, by that petition that lists 30 civil rights groups. You think, well, they're obviously right. The vast majority of people are going to assume that. And the point I made to Glenn was, when this happens, especially when it comes to financing terror, because I broke a story with Glenn 3 or 4 weeks ago, because I found a group admitting that they gave money to a Hamas hostage holder, and they have a nonprofit in Washington State. And they're also, I didn't release this yet, this will be, I'll let you guys, they're teaming up with libertarians also. There's a big offensive right now trying to find, especially libertarians identify as anarchist capitalists, actually. So it's going off in all these directions. I said to Glenn, when this type of thing happens on Iranian soil, you have these kind of independent organizations financing terror and fomenting extremism. We have a term for that. It's called state sponsorship of terrorism. We might blow you up for that. We'll certainly sanction you over it. When it happens in America's nonprofit sector, we call it charity, and we give you a tax deduction for it. But it's operationally the same thing. And one of the things that we're seeing is that the money isn't just coming into the U.S., and this is especially true in the radical Islamic world. Most of the money is coming out of the U.S. to fund the conflicts overseas now. We are the exporter. 9/11 was all about Saudi Arabia and Qatar and these other countries funneling extremism into us. They've developed such a network in our own safe harbor that we give them that we're now exporting it back to those countries, especially because a lot of Muslim countries are kicking out the extremists. So now they're relying on America to fight back. It's a mirroring of the situation on 9/11. It's astonishing. And so what is this threat? After 9/11, we had to really struggle for a lot of years to identify it and convince people that it's worth identifying, even in the first place. I would propose that we have to look at this very differently. I call it the Global Seditionist Movement. Why? Because the ideology is seditionist. It's about overthrowing the global system, remaking in their image, so that is sedition. It goes against even international law, domestic law. So on a global level, it's, as a behavior, sedition. Ideologically, it's sedition, because they believe that's also the right thing to do, that their ideology will flourish. How? Through sedition. And they often call themselves seditionists. So it's best to use their own words so that you don't get into this argument about semantics. You want to call yourself seditionist? Okay. So Global Seditionist Movement is what I call it. And there's three wings to it. The first is what I call the Turtle Island Intifada. Turtle Island is a now fashionable term, especially among Gen Z and TikTokers, where just like they refuse to say Israel, they say so-called Israel because it's really Palestine, occupied Palestine. They say the United States is occupied Turtle Island because there's a myth that doesn't even have a lot of credibility, but they think that all of the indigenous tribes, all of the Native Americans refer to the continent of North America and Central America as Turtle Island. They believe that Earth was created on the back of a turtle. There's a creation story behind it. But then what's really twisted about that, and there is some truth that there was that belief, and it does actually, there's elements also that intersect with the Noah's flood story and things like that. But there is very little record that the indigenous tribes universally all said, oh, where were we? We're on Turtle Island. That got popular in like the 60s and 70s. And then it got adopted. And so you will see, and you'll see this especially on youngsters like Instagram and TikTok profiles, like for location, you'll see they'll put like, oh, land of the, whatever tribe, or they'll say occupied Turtle Island. What they're saying is the U.S. doesn't have a right to exist, and therefore it should be abolished. It's an admission of treason. It's one of those things I normally hate it when people say it. They're like, you don't like it, leave. But no, you're calling it Turtle Island, leave. No, that's kind of a clear line. If you're not going to call it United States and you're implying that therefore it's a legitimate state and should be destroyed, get out. What are you doing? You're funding the thing that you say is the worst thing in the world with your taxpayer money. So you're either the worst hypocrite in the world or you're just an idiot. Choose one. The Turtle Island Intifada, though, is what it consists of are communists, Marxists, anarcho-communists, anarchists, and Islamists have all adopted this, especially Students for Justice in Palestine. And so they say, we need a Turtle Island Intifada, just like a Palestinian Intifada to liberate Israel, or liberate Palestine from Israel. We have to liberate Turtle Island, and so it does justify violence, because if you're saying it's an occupied state, that we're committing genocide still against minorities, everyone would agree, well, yeah, that's the rare moment in life where violence could be justifiable. And that's our mantra. So the leg that probably this audience hears most about is what I call Turtle Island Intifada. That's the fusion of Marxists, Islamists, and some of the anarchists. The second is the one that some people get mad at me for saying this, but I've been talking about this thing developing since I was a teenager. This exact thing I'm talking about. So it's very important for me to stick to what I have been saying for so long in forecasting. The second is really the white nationalists, the neo-Nazis, a group called 764 that has like a satanic Nazi ideology. They will sometimes call themselves restorationists, but what they talk about restoring is before the Founding Fathers created America. Say, oh, we're doing what the Founding Fathers would want. We're the guardians of the Constitution by eliminating America and creating a white ethno-state, either breaking it up, balkanizing it, or taking it over and then having a white ethno-state where whites are a permanent majority according to the Constitution. And that is growing. And I know that the fact that it's growing is used and deployed against conservatives all the time. Totally gets used against me. But it has power because there's a certain element of truth to it. And we don't do ourselves favors when we just deny that element of truth and refuse to address it. It makes us look complicit or that we don't care. And so I've seen those networks massively growing. And I call them reactionary nationalists because they call themselves nationalists. You'll see them, the code words they'll say is like, oh, we're the true nationalists, the first nationalists, that type of thing. And basically what they're trying to say is that the minorities and everything that has grown or changed since when they feel the United States was rightfully founded has changed. Therefore, they are the original patriots by acting in an unpatriotic way. So you'll have a nationalist that might, and we'll get into them if you know what I'm referring to, advocate for the feudal system. The feudal system, where it's like you have like giant landowners that run everything. It's the antithesis of what the founding fathers would want. They say, oh, that's a better system. Oh, but I'm a nationalist. America first. That doesn't work. You have someone, like another woman I'll get into, that says, Putin's idea of establishing, becoming a czar isn't such a bad idea. I'll just say it, guys. Not such a bad idea. You can obviously tell who I'm imitating. But she said that. America first? No. You don't say that the U.S. should become a theocracy or become a white supremacist ethno-state or anything like that and get to credibly call yourself a nationalist. So that's the second thing. Reactionary nationalist. Reactionary because every institution, everything about America is something they want to dismantle. They can't name a thing they want to preserve. How can you be pro-American if you hate everything about it? So Turtle Island Intifada, some people will call that the far left. I think these terms are counterproductive and don't work at all anymore. Before you could say, oh, generally there are lines. I think the lines don't exist anymore. My worldview is crafted by studying the extremists. The left-right divide does not resonate with me, and it never has. I don't get it. It doesn't fit for me. So there's a Turtle Island Intifada, there's the reactionary nationalist, and then the third component is what I call the axis of sedition. Those are the foreign governments and foreign powers that are stirring all of this up. And they do it as a weapon of war, and they've talked about it for decades, said what they're going to do, and now they do it, and somehow it works. And nobody says anything. It's really spearheaded by Russia, honestly. The strategy has overall been spearheaded by them and designed by them. But then, of course, you have Qatar, you have the Chinese Communist Party heavily involved, the Iranian regime. You used to have the Venezuelan regime involved a little bit, but something happened to that guy. The Cuban regime's involved in it, but probably won't be too much longer. Nicaragua, maybe a little bit. Also probably not too much longer. The Turkish government, North Korea, Pakistan, Bangladesh now. Most people don't know this. Bangladesh has been taken over by essentially another Taliban-type group, in addition to Afghanistan falling to the Taliban. So that's going to be a big thing that blows up. Belarus, you can go around the globe. There's a lot of governments that are involved in this. The good news is that the Allied camp is much larger, more powerful. We're just not up to date in how these guys fight. I mean, they're hitting us, and we're not hitting back. We're not defending ourselves. This shouldn't be a problem. It's a problem because we're very stuck in our ways, and our adversaries have said, okay, well, we can't overpower you, so let's come up with some new ideas. I have an idea that's so stupid it might work. Why don't we just tell the Americans that they deserve to be destroyed? Maybe they'll believe us. And then guess what? It worked. And then they invested money in it. I mean, it's like kind of that simple. And so the axis of sedition is allied with the Turtle Island Intifada and the reactionary nationalists as part of the Global Seditionist Movement. And it's not by invasion, it's through amplification. It's through waging war on social media. Before that, it was newspapers and propaganda outlets, a lot more difficult. Now, they can hire bot farms, they have trolls, or they have hired people that actually go and will harass you in comments. I'll see it. I can identify it. A lot of people can if you pay close attention to this. And what they do is they achieve social media saturation. And the two goals are this. Number one, yes, is to convince you of certain lines. And there's a lot of lines that people have come to believe from this, just hearing the same thing over and over again, and then having trusted people amplify it. The other one is to just make you so confused that you stop thinking. Because they want America to split apart and stay apart. Now what happens when people start thinking? You find agreement. You do things that are constructive. Alliances are formed. It's necessary for the country to operate. But if you can confuse people, exhaust them because I don't know what's true. I don't know what's true. I can't figure it out. Screw it. I'm going to go watch TV. And I'm not even going to vote. Or I'm just going to believe what I already believe and I don't care about anything from that point. Those are all victories. That all works, according to the strategies that they've written and talked about for a long time. Those behaviors work. That is giving them a victory in a battle. And now why? What's the objective? I'll give you some examples. So there's a guy named Alexander Dugin, who I encourage you all to memorize his name and look for, because it's like having a enemy flag on you if you're trying to figure out who, I'll say, a traitor is. Because Alexander Dugin hates America, decided at a certain point, I think I can target conservatives and Christians and MAGA. And honestly, I've known about this guy for a long time before he became a big figure among that audience. And they were talking about it, and I said, there's no way in hell this is going to work. I mean, you Google him, you see his crazy ideas. He incorporates elements of Nazism, destroying America. America is part of the Antichrist, so he incorporates end times theology, but it's all genocidal, just the worst stuff imaginable. He's not going to get an audience. He's going to find someone else to do it. No, he's on conservative podcasts now all the time. And some of the people out there, especially the ones that dabble a little bit in anti-Semitism, look at who they follow. The ones especially that don't follow a lot of people, they follow Dugin. Most people don't even know who he is. You have to have some bad people around you, and in some pretty bad echo chambers to even know who he is. And then to embrace him, and then some have him on their shows and promote him. And that's kind of the point, man. He's known as Putin's brain, because so much of what Putin has done, and the ideology that's being instilled in Russian society right now, and outside of Russian society, comes from him. So he's known as Putin's brain, and he doesn't hide what he does. But what him and Putin also refer to Russia as, what their destiny is, it's restoring a holy empire. Eternal Rome, they'll call it. And whereas the US, and now they'll call us globalists because it works for his audience, but they'll use different terms. We are the Antichrist, basically. Globalist, Antichrist, anything that's anti-Russia is now part of the Antichrist, and they're saying that they are the modern-day righteous Christian crusaders, even though they persecute Christians all day long. But here's a quote from Dugin. And he's been advocating for this for a long time. He says, "Today's Ukrainians are a race of degenerates that crawled up from the sewage. Genocide is in order." Putin's brain, guys. And I don't blame anybody for thinking especially if we've been dealing with Al-Qaeda for so long, that Russia appears rational. There must be some rationality behind what they're doing, and buying some of those lines about, geopolitically, this is why we have to do it. This is what they're saying that you're not being told about. And they're not hiding it from you. You're not looking for it. You haven't had anyone tell you. Here's another quote. Perhaps Dugin's most famous quote. And none of the people boosting him tell you this one. But they know it if they've Googled. "Russia should introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social, and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist, and sectarian groups, thus destabilizing internal political processes in the US. It would also make sense simultaneously to support isolationist tendencies in American politics." So if that's what he's saying he's doing, what's he doing being embraced by you? Is what I would want to know by anybody, and some of the names. Well, Glenn Greenwald is now somebody on the right. Tucker Carlson's probably his biggest booster. Alex Jones repeatedly having him on. In fact, Alex Jones has multiple Russian agents on and never tells you. Victor Bout, one of the first Russian agents I learned about as a kid, because I started studying this stuff when I was like 11 or 12. I was a weird kid, but it worked out for me. Victor Bout, a famous convicted arms dealer for Russian intelligence, eventually gets convicted because he's an anti-American terrorist. Specifically, he was arming communist terrorists in Colombia that were backed by Venezuela. Is that the resume of a guy who speaks to a conservative Christian audience? What's he doing on Alex Jones' show all the time, talking about what Christians should do and why they should ally with Russia? Why doesn't Alex Jones tell the audience, just so you know, he's convicted of being an anti-American terrorist. Candace Owens interacting with Alexander Dugin and other people like him. Why is it I'm seeing this pattern over and over and over? And it's not like he's a famous guy like a band that's like, I just happen to like his material. No, there's something going on with all of that. And the goal, and some people have called it this, and I like the term, there's two things. Number one is cognitive warfare. It's warfare on the brain. The Russians and their allies increasingly and they use the same networks, and you can tell they're sharing information. They invest a lot of money in psychological analysis of people. They study people as if they're objects because their ideology kind of looks at you like that. Like we would say it's a little repulsive, like to look at people and study how to manipulate them all the time. To them, you're kind of like a robot. So it's like no different than studying a machine. A machine with, some level of morality. And so it's cognitive warfare, and then the goal is discourse collapse. Discourse collapse. It's the deliberate strategy of making civil discourse impossible, so a society can no longer reason, govern, compromise, even describe reality, because then you're paralyzed and you can no longer defend yourself. And ultimately, your society doesn't exist. You achieve discourse collapse over a prolonged period of time, your country doesn't exist without a functioning civil society. That's worse than a nuclear attack. You want to destroy the United States? That's the best way I could ever think of. So here's some tweets from Dugan, for example. November 20th. For the first time, I like what Nick Fuentes says. It's strategic. I'm radically against racism. The only way to overthrow the rotten elite is a right-left alliance. January 14th, total support for heroic Candace Owens. Macron is a pervert and his wife is a trans woman and trans monkey. October 7th, Candace is the real hero. She is right in everything. He retweeted her post about claiming that Charlie Kirk's coming to her in the dreams to tell her she's right about everything. He posts out to his audience in Russia today, the Russian propaganda networks, then restate this. Dreams are extremely important. Candace Owens is sincere and brave and beautiful as always. She is on the right side of the cosmic battle always. Tucker introduces Dugan as an academic philosopher. He writes about big ideas. He didn't tell his audience that those big ideas include things like this. Steve Bannon, I'm sorry to say, I've had a friendly relationship with him in the past, said, I'm such a fan of Dugan's writing. I met with him. Alex Jones, it's not that we, him and Dugan, are plagiarizing each other saying the same things, it's that we are seeing the same things. And the list goes on. And here's the thing. This is scary and it's poisonous. But you've got to understand that, yes, it's crazy. Their ideologies are crazy. And yes, a lot of these people do appear to have mental health issues and are arguably crazy as individuals. They're not crazy for thinking that they will win and win this way. I look at the data. A poll in 2017, long before the explosion of extremism that we've seen in recent years, 8% of American adults said that they supported Antifa. 8%. 8% supported white nationalism. 4% of which supported neo-Nazism. That's 16% supporting the worst ideologies and claiming to be Americans. Gets even worse. There's more macro trends that are even worse. 16% support banning interracial marriage. 4% strongly disagree that all races are equal. 20 to 23% support dividing up the country, according to political parties, as if that's going to work. As if you can just try, like it's a puzzle, and you just have to just detach things. 20% believe violence may be necessary to set America on the course that they think is correct. 47% believe civil war is likely. There was a poll done of the different regions, and I said, well, if your state united with 3 or 4 states around you, what percentage of you would support secession, creating your own country? Consistently across the board, it was 23 to 44%, 44% being the South. South had the highest numbers for that. So we have a problem of pro-terrorism and extremist voters. That's the reality. Think about what elections are won by. Trump won by, I believe, less than 2%. What are the numbers I'm throwing around? 20, 30. The worst, 16. Biden won by about 4.5. Hillary won the popular vote by 2. You look at the last time around, you look at the individual states, how much states were won or lost by? Way less than the amounts I'm talking about. What if all of these extremist voters start voting the same way? They don't need a majority. They just need to be able to credibly say that they are the swing voters. And all those consultants, especially those that get rich off of telling people how to win, are going to kiss their feet. It's already happening. How often do you hear, no enemies on the right? Well, we need to win, so we better not confront evil. It's all the same thing. That's the Global Seditionist Movement. And so things have been building up, and that's why what happened on September 10th is so important. And really, I realized it only this morning how much of a microcosm what happened afterwards this is. I mean, there was a certain element of the population, not that big, but big enough to be scary, that was celebrating what happened to Charlie. And the whole world was kind of traumatized, and if you look at what our adversaries were saying, they're amping it up, of course, because they want an explosion to happen, but they also, I think, honestly felt that their moment had come, because their ideology says that structurally, no matter what they do, this moment comes. And they said, I think this is it. So not many people, I think, understood the danger that we're in. I mean, there were elements on the right, people got overly emotional, that were saying, well, you know what, maybe we start doing it back to them. And there were people on the left that were saying, well, I think the right is now going to do it against us. We were prepared for the retaliation. It was spiraling downwards, just at an alarming rate. And then became Charlie's Memorial, which was historical in my mind for the fight against extremism. Partially because one woman, Erica Kirk, who was briefly the most important person on the planet at that moment, reacted with forgiveness and powerfully spoke in a way that would go against everyone's basic human instinct in that type of moment where you're filled with anger and despair and every negative emotion. Somehow she resisted it and did something incredibly powerful, and then people started filling church pews. Every charity had volunteers showing up. The dialogue changed. I monitored dialogue and the communication. It changed. And it didn't die out like a fad. It was changing, getting better and better and better. And I said, my God, the world just changed for the better. But then as the momentum hit its peak, somebody decided to profit off of it. Candace. And she hijacked it and filled all that dialogue, because everyone only has a limited amount of time each day, with irresponsible conspiracy mongering, anti-Semitism, reckless drama, everything negative that you can think of. And it blunted, and things started receding. I mean, I could track it and prove it in terms of data. I saw things were getting better. Boom, that happened, and then started going backwards. And if you go to her X account right now, at the top, what do you see? And keep in mind, I thought her supposed best friend, was just assassinated in front of everyone. She was just so heartbroken. Here's what exists at the top from December 31st of her X profile. 2025 was one hell of a year. Beyond grateful to all of you who tuned into the podcast and took us to #1 globally. I'm always one step of my haters, whom I am grateful to as well. It's #1 because of you trashing Charlie's widow. And it was at that moment that I realized that we were witnessing something that maybe had never happened before in nature. And it was a kind of unique reverse metamorphosis of a butterfly not realizing that it was a slug. Because this is the depths of what human beings are capable of. But immensely powerful, and every outlet that's adversarial to the United States is parroting her content. So it's not just about a personal grievance or annoyance with her. Understand that that's what they're gravitating towards. That's what they're amplifying. And so a lot of what you hear that you think is probably just a fact from hearing over and over again, and you're like, well, I'm not listening to Candace, but you might be listening to someone who listened to someone who listened to someone who listened to her. And so the weapon really is amplification. And so this is all frightening, understand that, but understand we stand at an inflection point. You look around the world, massive progress is being made. I wrote an article recently that we could see up to 24 Muslim-majority countries sign the Abraham Accords very rapidly. I laid out a strategy in order to accomplish it. I actually lead tours in Saudi Arabia. I came out with a film called Finding the Mountain of Moses because I snuck into Saudi Arabia because I had been long interested in evidence that Moses was there, that the Exodus was the Israelites going from Egypt to Saudi Arabia, and that the evidence was actually being covered up. A few people knew about it, and so I went there and I got video that had never been taken before and released it, and Glenn Beck promoted it, calling it a game changer for mankind because it was so powerful. You can look it up on YouTube. It's called Finding the Mountain of Moses. But what that resulted in was that in 2020, I had the honor to co-lead the first officially government-sanctioned Christian tour in Saudi history to these areas that we think might be the real Mount Sinai, where Moses got the 10 Commandments. And Saudis love it. So there's trends that you may not be seeing that are extremely positive and are more powerful than the negative ones that you have to pay attention to. And that's why I said we also have to operationalize a lot of what we know. And I said on Charlie's show, I said, today's the beginning of the counteroffensive for me. The release of the Soros report, the counteroffensive begins today, is what I said. And I meant it. It wasn't rhetoric to promote some product. That's why I formed Mauro Institute. And I have a range of things that I'm doing using my research of studying this for a long time that I want to do to beat this back. I don't think it's even that hard or that expensive in most cases. But I am starting from scratch. So I'm asking for your help. That can be in terms of volunteering time, expertise if you know something. If you can donate or you know a foundation that might be willing to donate. I'm not doing the typical nonprofit thing of trying to fundraise all the time. I fundraise as I need. Right now I really need it. Like to the point where if I need dummy cell phones, because for the intel work I do, where I try to catch terrorists before they do things and people doing crimes, sometimes I just run out of money for burner phones and computers and things like that. I've had people who have volunteered who help me do kind of mindless tasks that I feel almost like offensive I'm asking them to help me with. But then it enables me to do things like get a guy arrested who's trying to finance Hamas. So there are things that can be done that are simple. There are things that are expensive. That, like every single person can really do something for whatever cause to your heart. I'm not even saying help me with mine, but just donate your time, your money, your expertise, your contacts. When you're sitting on the toilet and you're going through your phone, keep in mind, hey, there's a contact that this person, I should connect with this person. Because some of my biggest breakthroughs has just been that. Some random guy being like, hey, guess who I happen to know? Let me introduce you to him, and then amazing things happen. So everybody has immense capability to be part of what I call the counter-offensive and to positively contribute to civil society. I hope that my outline of their strategies resonates to where you view every interaction you have online with someone you disagree with, or even people you agree with and may not be getting along with, as a battle. Because to them, that's how they're talking about this. Every time we interact with each other, it's a battle to them, that we either win or we lose. Civil society improves or it gets worse. They want us to have negative interactions. They want us to not get along. They want us to retweet the thing that we didn't quite research, but sounds kind of right. The thing where we say, oh, all Republicans are Nazis or all Democrats are communists. Like all of those moments when we get into those temptations now, to them, that's the currency that decides whether we win or lose. And honestly, I believe that there's an immediate impact with that. And every psychologist and peer-reviewed study will tell you the same thing. We underestimate our ability to influence other people, positively or negatively, in a single instant. And we have to take that with the utmost seriousness. Something you say to somebody might bother them 10 years from now and you don't even remember it. And then as a whole, that damages America. So you just have a laser focus on helping people. An example of that, and I'll wrap up, I know I'm going long, is what I did in Afghanistan. I'm not saying this to brag, I'm saying this to actually almost demean myself. I have no military background. I had an opportunity to help the persecuted Christians in Afghanistan when the Taliban was taking over, and people at the US trained and civil rights activists. I was like, I don't know how to get involved in this, but I had a lot of Afghans that followed me because they cared about the issues of extremism because it impacts their lives so much. And so when the Taliban was taking over, and remember, it had been 20 years, so you had girls who grew up thinking they're going to be a doctor and going to college and being told, guess what? You don't have to wear a burqa and stay inside all day. It's the most horrible thing. I said, well, someone gave me an opportunity to get involved. Next thing I knew, I had a database of about 15,000 Afghans asking me for help. And I was just raising little bits of money, $20 from somebody, and I could show them, I know a kid that doesn't have socks on his feet and is freezing in the streets because Afghanistan has a deadly winter every year. And I could see and have pictures of that. I could show them the $20 bought socks for that kid and his brother. I mean, it's just unbelievably empowering for me as someone who didn't, in terms of resume, have business being involved with this. It grew to the point where I had volunteers who had no background in this. At one point I had 30 volunteers, but I primarily had 2 or 3 people. It was myself, my friend Logan, my friend Alana. And we were hiding at one point over 500 people from the Taliban in safe houses that we managed. I mean, there was a, thank you. Glenn Beck teamed up with me and helped evacuate about 70 of the Christians that I was hiding. And I had to pay out of my pocket because during that course I actually lost my job partially due to that. I saw some people do some horrible things with money that was raised for it. So it was simultaneously the best and worst time of my life, especially when I had to tell them the money ran out and I couldn't protect them anymore. But in the meantime, there were 1,500 people that we delivered emergency aid to. And I didn't go over there. I did it all through my phone. It was just networking. I just had a bunch of people doing their time to help me handle signal chats and send in orders. So understand that we have a new era of empowerment that you haven't actualized yet. Nobody gets it. Nobody gets it. That was doable with just me and 2 people, and then we grew and built a team of about 30 people. And you know how much money we spent total on all that, including salary for some of my part-time work so I could pay bills? About $400,000. Meanwhile, we got 70 people evacuated out of Afghanistan as the Taliban was on their tails, delivered emergency life-saving aid to about 1,500 people. There were a few thousand people that we helped move out of the country on land. We even at one point, the Taliban had surrounded a building that a Christian we knew had actually fled there. So he fled to a worse spot. And I had a veteran, an Afghan guy who served in the military who was helping me. And he sent his friends to go check it out. He's like, man, the Taliban got that on lockdown. Well, we can only rescue that guy. They're going door to door in the next 2 days. We got to act quickly. And this is one of the stories that I'm sure half of you are going to think I'm making it up, but I promise you it's true. I might be able to even prove it. But we actually set up a fake car crash. We deliberately rammed a car into the Taliban checkpoint guy who was running it, his car, so that he would get mad and distracted. We had someone, I won't give away all the details, we had spotters on the ground with distractions, and we pulled them out. Car happens, the guy starts smacking the guy, the Taliban doesn't know that that guy's working for us, and then we pulled him out and got him out of there. So that's not with millions of dollars, that's not with bringing expertise or anything. So the power that everybody has is unbelievable, and I'll leave with this. And this is a message that's actually probably the most important thing I'll say, and is something I've really only articulated like this. Actually, this is the first speech I'm doing it. Even people without faith can't deny a simple fact, which is that never before in history and never in the future will there ever be someone like you. Not even remotely like you. May look like you, have similar sense of humor, but your experiences will be different. You will read and learn different things. No person remotely is like another. That doesn't exist anywhere else. And so if we all can all agree that what makes something valuable is that it's rare, and it brings something to society like gold. Why is gold rare? Because gold valuable because it's rare. Diamonds, they go up in value because they're rare. That pales in comparison to each of you, because there's only one of you that ever existed and ever will exist. And that makes you the most precious diamond that was ever created. So the second that you think you don't matter, that you don't have some special role carved out for you, whether you're a person of faith or not, understand that's the most illogical thing that you can say. Because that's equivalent to saying that the rarest diamond has no value, that gold has no value, it's worthless. It logically makes no sense. And the reason I've been able to have this crazy life that I've had is because of what people told me were my disabilities, the things that I struggle with. Thank God for all of them. Seriously, every strength I have is because of something I consider to be a flaw or a disability. And a few weeks ago, I said, I wonder what the Bible says about disabilities. You know how many times the Bible uses the word for disability? 0. It doesn't exist. We made that up. Because we think we know what you're supposed to be like, what your role is, what you're supposed to be able to do, and what you're supposed to be doing. So you don't do that, you're disabled. Well, maybe we should pay attention to the words that, if you're a person of faith, that God uses. He doesn't use the word disabled. He might say someone's blind, because it's just a biological fact. Maybe somebody has a broken leg. Not calling them disabled. They're uniquely abled. All that means is that you're specially designed. The thing that makes you weird, the thing that you think is your flaw that makes you inferior to other people, that's why you're uniquely abled. You're not disabled. And the biblical pattern, and this is especially true in my life, is that God uses the unexpected. He uses the most insecure. He uses the doubter, the flawed, the person who's depressed, the sinner who can't seem to quit his habit. All of those people are used. And the ones that are used the most are the ones that think they can't be used. And so that, to me, is the most important message. Beyond anything else, I hope you find the subject material interesting. But if there's one thing I want you to remember, it is that message when you leave here. And so I'm happy to take Q&A from there. Thank you.
Ryan, I love the message of the new era of empowerment. I love that so much. I can't bear how our nation, how our schools are teaching people to be victims. Because we can all be somewhat heroic in doing one small or one giant thing. And by the way, Ryan is actually being very, very humble. I don't read people's resumes during my introductions, because you can read that online, but read Ryan's resume. It is extraordinary. And Ryan, may I share a little bit about what you're talking about with your disabilities?
Sure.
Okay, so Ryan wasn't born into an easy situation at all. He could very well, he's blind in one eye. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, wasn't born into peace and harmony, right?
No.
Right?
Not quite.
And yet here he is fighting every single day, doing what he can, doing extraordinary things. I'm not sure, you said something about it's actually easy to do what you said. It's not that hard. You said the work is not that hard. Can you give an example of what somebody told you, Ryan, impossible, and you said, well, we got to do that? You gave one with the car accident.
Every single thing.
Every single thing.
I mean, doing the intelligence analysis as a teenager, certainly. Saying I think I could handle Fox News Channel, and I was on there at age 23 pretty regularly. The Afghanistan thing, definitely, that's the best example, because some of the other stuff is hard. Okay, it takes a lot of time. When I set up, the big thing that I did was for 10 years, I led a civilian intelligence network. Reported thousands of ideologically motivated threats, terrorists, criminals, getting into their chats and getting the evidence. But that's hard and time consuming. The policy analysis I do is a lot of studies. There's some things that are hard, some things that take a lot of investment. The stuff with Afghanistan, though, that was all easy. It was just, everybody can text. Everybody can donate a little bit. $5, $10. And I'm not saying just to Mauro Institute, I'm saying to whatever. Emails, it was all communications, things that people do every single day, and we just weaponized it. And made a huge impact on the ground. And quite frankly, and I haven't talked about this, we had a database of US-trained Afghan soldiers who wanted to fight the Taliban. We could have created a rebel army. Myself and the other organizations I work with, we had the data to do that and the contacts to do that. Right now, there is no rebel army because the Taliban vanquished and took over the whole place. We could have brought them to Ukraine or somewhere else to help fight it. We had a legion of people that we had helped that wanted to help continue fighting alongside America. That wasn't utilized. But what was utilized was just your average person. So on the policy level, that's annoying, but on the personal level, we had just all these people who are retired, people in college, just dedicating a few hours of their time each week for a very limited portion of time, or making introductions. And the Taliban knew our names. They certainly knew my name. And it was just an amazing thing to see. So out of all the things I've been blessed to be able to do, I would say that's the biggest example of something someone said, oh, you're not going to be able to do that. What are you getting involved in? And it was just, it beat my expectations unbelievably. Same thing with Saudi Arabia, because I even told myself I wouldn't be able to do it. I said, if tourism is banned and they're arresting anyone that's trying to get to these biblical sites, and there's no video of them, why would I think I can get there? But a series of, I think, divine things happened that gave me a confidence I normally don't have. Got rid of the anxiety I normally do have in a situation where my anxiety should have been the highest. I'll tell you, I repeatedly almost got arrested when I was in Saudi Arabia for this biblical type work I was doing.
Where he snuck his mother in.
I did do that, yeah. She almost got arrested as well with me. We went in and out 3 times. And to this day, I can't explain it, and other people were there and can't explain it. First of all, when we thought we were about to be arrested, I was in control of myself, but I just said to everybody, I said, we're not being arrested, and we're going to what we think is the split rock that Moses hit, and the water came out next. And that was a site that I felt that we were told, you really can't get to. I'm not saying I don't want to make it sound like a spooky thing, like, I was in control of my body, I was taken over by it wasn't that, but there was some divine confidence that came into me in that moment. It made me say that, and it was true. And I had no fear when the police were coming to our hotel rooms to interrogate us. And then it happened repeatedly, and each time, the security personnel catching us clearly in lines behind lines we shouldn't be in, walked away. I can't explain that. How does that happen multiple times? I don't, in one trip.
Okay. All right. A couple people interested in the UN, which I call the Stern letter writing organization. What are your thoughts about the UN?
United Nations, what a funny thing to call it. It's like the paralyzed nations of anything. I mean, it's even from a business management perspective, it makes no sense how it's set up. So yeah, my opinion is not, I mean, if you can do a collaboration through it, because there's some UN agencies that do things, okay, I get that. But we should have higher standards for ourselves and efficiency, because if an organization like the UN ran in any type of business, everyone would have been fired. They'd be like, this is a stupid idea. And so what I think Trump is doing with the Board of Peace makes a lot of sense, even though he's trying to deny that it's a replacement to the UN. It's a replacement to the UN. I mean, you're trying to get every country to sign on to an international community system for joint decision making. That's a replacement UN. But I've been on board for a long time for saying there has to be a league of, either, if not a league of democracies, then an Abrahamic alliance of some, I don't know, there has to be something like this being put together. Some of the things that we're doing with the Board of Peace and who we're choosing to empower in Gaza, I'm not such a fan of, so I'm not terribly optimistic about where this is going to go. But the fact that the conversation is even headed in that direction and you have an infrastructure being built for success is unbelievable and something I never thought I would see.
What's your take on the, quote, unholy alliance as described by David Horowitz, the extreme atheists and the Islamists?
So I would say, I mean, the commonality here is just we stand up for the oppressed and you're the oppressor. And who's the oppressor? The more powerful entity. There was a study done a long time ago. There's a book called Underdogma that studied the phenomenon of why people gravitate towards really the pro-terror Palestinian cause, like not just the pro-Palestinian cause. And what they did was they found that if they gave students just learning this topic a map that was of the Middle East, and you see Israel being small, and they said, well, here's a description. Who do you think is like the good guy and the bad guy? They would say, Israel's the good guy. Those other countries that are really big are the bad guys. And then they gave them another map to another group of students that are very similar, same description, but the map was different. It was a blown up map where Israel was big and the Palestinian areas were smaller. They said, who's good and who's bad? Oh, clearly, the Israelis are the big ones, they're the bad ones. The Palestinians are the good ones because they're smaller. And it's really kind of just that simple. The unholy alliance has expanded. I could actually draw for you a new cycle of radicalization. There's something called the horseshoe theory, where the more you move in one side's extremism, the closer you get to the other side. A horseshoe. So it's like a U shape. You get more far left, the closer you get to the far right is the idea. I am arguing that we should replace it with the oval theory because they now overlap. They come together as one single entity. That's why I call it the Global Seditionist Movement. So when someone brings up the unholy alliance and things like that, red-green alliance, I say, it's time to modernize it, folks. We've been talking about that for a long time. Because now the cycle is, and I can trace it on all the social media accounts, especially on Telegram, where I see the same propaganda cycling. I literally will follow it. Going from like an Islamist chat to the Antifa chat. Within the Antifa chat will be anarcho-communists, anarcho-capitalists. It'll go from the anarcho-capitalists to the white nationalists and the neo-Nazis. And then it'll go to the Islamists, and then the Islamists, it ends up back with the communists. And so it's a very clear circle here. It's a very clear single digital colony or ecosystem. And that's why I say to me, when I hear about the civil war on the right or a civil war on the left, I'm like, those have been obsolete terms to me for a long time. You're talking about people clinging to trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. These are just separate things now. And so the Global Seditionist Movement to me is its own separate thing. And
how long has it been going on, the Global Seditionist Movement?
Oh, what a good question. So it's really been coalescing, I think. It's been going on, I mean, you could go back to World War II with Hitler allying with Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the jihadist leader that led the Muslims in Jerusalem. And there was a jihadist alliance between the Nazis and the Islamists. And then you had the Islamists teaming up with the communists during the Cold War. Communists actually teamed up with Nazis. Russia sponsors Nazi terrorism in the United States. Most people don't know that. The biggest Nazi terrorist group in the US, the base, we found out he was a Russian intelligence agent and he's hiding over there. So all of this has actually been going on a long time. Now it's really coalescing. I just tweeted about, there's a guy, I think in Michigan, running as a Republican for Congress, and it turns out he's backed by the Chinese Communist Party. So
that's special.
So this is happening constantly now. So it's
Dave
coalesced.
Johnson, can you get on that?
What? So it's been going on for a very long time. So I can't answer that part. When has it been coalescing? I would say definitely. I would say since 2010 is when I started really seeing it coalesce. 2010, 2011, and now it's just gone it's just skyrocketed. Especially since October 7th, it went to a whole new level.
Okay. Question about whether we are kind of by nature handicapped, because the question is, for those who by definition love individual liberty and freedom, be able to collaborate like this to form coalitions. I mean, the coalitions that you've written about and described are tremendous.
Yeah.
Can we take on those big coalitions? Because by nature, people who love freedom and individual liberty don't group like that. They don't think like that. That's
a great question. A great sociological question. Yes, you can take them on because they've been defeated in the past. It's different now because of social media and things like that. But understand, these ideas are bad. Like they're so easy to debunk. They usually fuel like. Some of the people mentioned Tucker and Candace. I can trace it right back to personal resentment and things that have not, it's not like they studied, and same thing with the students protesting. They didn't read Karl Marx or some intellectual book and say, that's a good idea. I've come to the intellectual conclusion that this is what I should advocate for. No, the vast majority of the students are getting involved in these ideologies. It's because they're scared to death about life after college. They say, how am I going to home? My family, we can't afford health care now. My mom can't afford medicine. The system is horrible. And they gravitate towards whoever says, revolution, I want to change the system the most. And they say, that resonates with me. He feels my pain. He gets it. We need sweeping change. And then they get brought into it. It's not like this intellectual thing. That comes later. So yes, you can absolutely defeat it. I think if we zeroed in, especially on the high schools and middle school, because the Democratic Socialists of America and these other groups, they're forming groups now on that level, middle school and high school. And you know why they succeed? Is because for all their faults, they care. And they're willing to hurt a little bit to help somebody. It's not just, oh, I have a spare $5. Sorry, I look, not so much the white nationalists, but like the Antifa types, they have more empathy than a lot of people that I agree with. I mean, they socialize by helping each other. Someone can't afford their phone bill, they share their Cash App and they all rush to help each other. And that's what they're proud of. When you look at the TikTok kids, as much as they annoy me, and so many of them don't even know basic facts about things like the Holocaust.
I'm really just kind of standing here, Ryan. I'm rather amused that we're talking about the generosity of the Antifa crowd.
And it's true.
I mean, I'm trying to imagine this.
It's hard to imagine because
you mean they'll share a sandwich with me?
Yeah, you're only seeing the destruction, but you're not seeing what builds those bonds is the fact that they're very open about the struggles they're facing, and people come to actually help them. And they say, well, I want to know what drove you to do that, and guess what it is? It's anarchism and things like that. Maybe if the churches and synagogues were a little bit more proactive in reaching out to those people, you probably have a very different result.
Yeah.
Because these people are just showing up. And
I think that's a very similar. I mean, I think there's a parallel thing with our civics education, right? We just sort of thought it would happen. Right? We didn't educate people. We didn't give them anything to be passionate about in terms of the beauty of the gift of the United States of America and our Constitution. So if we don't teach people, if there's nothing to love, right? If there's nothing to be passionate about.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. How many people can articulate why the U.S. is great, especially of the younger generation? I mean, how many people have read George Washington's farewell address, even in this room? This room, probably a lot of you. Farewell address. I mean, everybody should be reading that every year. If that was required reading in the schools from a young age, the whole country would be dramatically different, and we probably wouldn't be dealing with this problem.
Right. Okay, another question. One of our audience members says, you said that the Allies are powerful and plentiful. Who are they, and are there any in California?
Oh man, I'm resisting temptation to go into, so there's two worlds now. There's the national borders one, and then there's the one that's emerging and replacing that. There's what I call the decentralization revolution taking place, where power is being decentralized, individuals are becoming more powerful, and so you're actually touching on a point that I make, like with the Abraham Accords, what I've been trying to tell the people I know in the Trump administration is, sign up things like the Kurds, like not just countries and governments, because those borders are going away. They're being replaced to reflect local realities. Local communities are rising. Local demographics are rising. So loop them in. So saying, oh, well, where are our allies around the world in terms of governments and then our allies within California makes actually a lot of sense from my theory of how this is all going. I don't know about in California just because I don't know the individual groups, but I know wherever you go, you find friends sometimes in very surprising places. And usually, if you think a group of 10 people are bad people you can never work with, usually like 4 or 5 of them you actually can when you get to know them. I mean, that's just been my experience. So there's a lot within the United States, obviously. Keep in mind that as frightening as the polls I gave are, they're still a minority. And they weren't always that powerful, so it can pop up and it can recede. Allies around the world, Basically every country that I did not mention. Because there's very few ones in the middle. Like India is arguably in the middle, but I mean they're going to end up on the Allied side. I would argue they already kind of are. There's some reasons that they disagree with us and are a little stubborn at times, but you know, there's a few countries in the middle. But you can still, I can make a map for you and actually show you. Okay, this one I would say is part of the Global Seditionist Movement, the axis of sedition, the foreign element. These are the allies. So every country besides those that I mentioned, the dozen or 14 that I think are like the key ones that have realized that destroying the United States is something achievable, and I would like to invest towards that opportunity.
Next question is, in this current political climate, what is one way what we can do to bridge the extreme divide before the midterms? Is there anything we could do before the midterms?
I would say I'm not enough of a political analyst to judge that. I love political science from a very academic way, so a broad picture and that type of thing. But in terms of political strategy before midterms, I have no idea because the Epstein thing has kind of that's impacted Trump's base in a way that I would not have anticipated that turn. So I think a lot of people are going to stay home. Yeah, I don't know. And also things are changing so rapidly. Each month is different. So I don't even know how you prepare for that time period.
All right, I'm going to give you the option on this one because this is a big can of worms. But do you want to talk about Epstein?
Oh yeah, he works for Russian intelligence, and I've known that forever. It's not like, I don't know. It's big controversy on social media right now because a lot of the documents are declassified and people are like, oh my God, look at all these Russian officials connect to Russian intelligence he's meeting with. I wonder what that's about. And all of these things are going on, and I'm like, man, as soon as the guy got arrested and became a figure, I was like, oh, that sounds like the Russians thing. I know how it goes. Because like I said, I was a weird kid. I studied Soviet and Russian intelligence operations for fun.
No, not just for fun. He got paid for it at 16.
At 16, yeah. Before that, when all the boys were playing sports and I couldn't because of my blind eye, I read about spies. And so it was easy for me to say, like, the Epstein thing was obviously a Russian thing to me. Whether other governments were working with them, there's two separate things. I was explaining it at dinner that are getting conflated. Number one, who did he work for? Well, if there's anyone he worked for, to what extent he worked for anybody, I mean, clearly the evidence would support Russia. And right from the beginning, as soon as the Epstein thing started happening, Russian sources of information started saying, it's the Jews, right from the beginning. And that's their standard operating procedure whenever they do something that they're going to get caught at. So they say, oh, it's the CIA, it's the Jews. And that's kind of how you know they have their hand in something. Is when they say that and it's like, well, we didn't even ask you. Sir, this is a Wendy's. Why are you talking about this? Why are you making that point when it's not even necessary? But did other governments, the Israelis, the Americans, everybody, use it as a source of information? Very likely, because that happens with intelligence gathering all the time. There's a bad guy over there. If we give him $500, he'll tell me information on the other bad guy I'm trying to get. Here you go. That goes on all the time. Expect to find those ties. They're not abnormal. Whether they're moral or right, that depends on the circumstance, but it does go on a lot. I would expect that. But then there's a separate question of who is actually operationally running with. And the classified documents now are just so absurdly clear. It's almost like a joke, like the Russians wanted us to find out. I mean, he was so tied in with them. If you follow me on X, you'll see I've posted just some of it, not all of it, because it's just too much now.
Ryan, I want to give you an opportunity right now, both a call to action and also I really kind of want to ask you, after I've spent a few hours with you, what was the strangest or most surprising connection in your research that you've made?
Oh, that's a good one. Strangest or most surprising? Most recently, there was a Turtle Island terrorist group, which I said on Going Back was coming, and it actually happened. And they got arrested because they were going to blow some stuff up. And I was looking at their profiles, and the one was a member of the Church of Satan. He was a Satanist. And then I looked at his social group, or is it her social group? I think they were a they. I think they were nothing. And their social group consisted of Christian anarchists. And so what you had was a Turtle Island terror plot from Marxist anarchists who are also Satanists that hang out with Christian
sure.
anarchists.
Of course. That makes complete sense, right?
So I thought, man, I'd love to go to a party with those people and see what level of logic that is in their arguments, man.
Oh my God. It's like the Gumby origami twisted.
Yeah.
I can't get there. All right. Well, Ryan, clearly, if we are indifferent to our own destruction, we can't survive as a nation.
That's true.
Right? So I think the first step to defeating the subversion is exposure. You've done a tremendous job, and I know you will continue to do a tremendous job. Thank you for bringing your insights to the Liberty Forum tonight. Please follow Ryan on X and follow his work, more importantly than a social media plea, because it's tremendous.
I forgot, RyanMauro.com is all. If you want to donate and sign up for a newsletter, or sign up for the newsletter, I should say, RyanMauro.com is where you can do it. Since I was saying how I'm bare bones right now, I'm getting things going, but any little bit of help is really appreciated.
All right. And tomorrow morning, when the members of the Liberty Forum wake up with the information that you have, what is your hope that they will do with this information tomorrow morning?
Say, I didn't realize I can kick so much ass and take so many names.
Kick ass and take names. Ryan Mauro.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Please like and subscribe to our channel to get updates on new speakers, and consider joining the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. You can do so at our website. If you don't want to join, but want to support the principles of American liberty, you can make a tax-deductible donation via our website. The links are in the description. Thank you again, and stay free.